to not only J. Edgar Hoover, and his record, of course, is full of commendations from the head of the vast organization, but also personal notes, including a get well card in 1963 from Hoover after Kitchell underwent surgery. In addition, George Kitchell is this FBI agent. In addition, in the 1990s interview, Kitchell's brother George, an offshore oil engineer, that explained that George Kitchell, was an old friend of George H.W. Bush. So they have a deep connection between Edgar Hoover, the head of the agency, and George Kitchell and George H.W. Bush. So really, the crazy thing about this overall, though, is Bush called in a pointless tip, something that he knew was pointless because he was already familiar with this guy and had assigned Reynolds to go to the house at the time and report the news to Parrott in specific. He calls this tip in about an completely innocent guy to a fellow FBI agent whom he knew could be counted on to file a report on this tip. Out of really what may have been hundreds of calls, some of them, like this one, really not even worthy of documenting. And after a cursory investigation, the tip was confirmed as useless. But the call itself was hardly without value. It was established for the record, if anyone asked, that Poppy Bush was not in Dallas when Kennedy was shot. By pointing to a seemingly harmless man who lived with his mother, Bush appeared to establish his own Pollyannish ignorance of the larger plot. So pretty much saying, oh, I don't know, I thought it was this other random guy who lived with his mom who did it. Well, Parrott had eyewitnesses to being in his Houston house before, after, and at the time of the shooting that took place 240 miles away. Bush had Kiwanis, this is where, again, giving that speech of the day, he had the Kiwanis eyewitnesses to where he was around 12:30 at the time of the shooting and the scheduled time of his luncheon speech. So the big mystery, however, is the call to the FBI. And you can really get a sense of how complicated and how many different strands these are and how none of them you can really see clearly 100%. So this call to the FBI. So Bush made this call. Parrott clearly was never any threat. Therefore, Poppy was willing to divert the investigative resources of the FBI on one of the busiest days in its history. Beyond that are the baffling particulars. Why did Bush have one of his people visit Parrott's home almost exactly as Poppy was fingering Parrott as a possible suspect? And why was Bush so determined to establish his presence in Tyler that day and to document it, as it were, his concern for Kennedy's well-being? Why was Parrott so unperturbed to have been falsely accused by Poppy Bush of killing or helping to possibly kill the President of the United States? The answer may lie in Poppy's mention to the FBI that he would be traveling from Tyler to Dallas and that he would be staying at the Sheraton. This was kind of, in fact, akin to a magician's trick, drawing the audience's attention slightly from the real action. In truth, Poppy had already been at the Sheraton in Dallas the night before speaking at that oil convention. By telling the FBI he was planning to go there, he created a misleading paper trail suggesting that his stay in Dallas was many hours after Kennedy's shooting rather than a few hours before. So he was really there the night before instead of the night of. In fact, although he did travel from Tyler to Dallas, he only did stay briefly and did not stay at the Sheraton at the time, and he went right back to Houston. The Parrott call served no purpose besides manufacturing a reason to create a government record of his presence in Tyler and his plan to go to Dallas on the 22nd, which he just didn't do. Once Parrott has served, however, unwittingly his purpose, and there was no reason for him to suffer, hence Reynolds' visit to Parrott's house at the time of the assassination, effectively creating an alibi, clearing Parrott, so there was no harm done. As for a reference to the Olmers and Barber's letter, why risk introducing such a controversial person like Bush's use of Joe Zeppa's plan? It helps establish that Bush had, in fact, spent time with Al Ulmer. Better to include Ulmer's wife's name, but not his, and Zeppa's name misspelled, so that should a rare, hardy investigator like Russ Baker in this book bother to figure out the sequence of events, Bush could claim that he had obviously had nothing to hide. After all, there was, in a way, with this Barber letter. In fact, Poppy Bush had a good reason to obfuscate the details of his relationship and his conduct, because they would at minimum lead to further inquiry at a time when an investigation to the death of a president should have been open-ended. The secrets themselves and the urgency of keeping them hidden would become a principal rationale in the family's political efforts. And, as we shall see, they go a long way toward explaining unprecedented information lockdown and seeming paranoia of the George W. Bush administration, whose earliest acts included an effort to put his father's records under the lock and key forever. That's all the time we have for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. Really do appreciate it. We will be back next week with another episode of Uprising Hidden History.